Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn here to talk to you about potential problems with Lian Li's TL and TL LCD fans that you might not be aware of when you go to install them in your system. I'm not scaremongering here. I just want to talk about the logic of how these fans install, because they are good fans, but there are some things that are a bit tricky about them that could cause you problems or you might not know. So I want you to know these things before you purchase and before you set them up so that you can get some ideas of what's what. Now, these are uni fans and they work in the same way as previous Lian Li fans in that you can connect groups onto the controller. Get a triple pack, you get this controller, you can plug multiple fans into each port, or you can now daisy chain the fans together by interlinking the cables and having multiple fans on one port. They're pretty straightforward. If you get a triple pack, you can click 3 fans together, set them up as that, and then you have one cable that plugs into either end of the fans and then connects up to the controller. I've done a full detailed wiring guide on these fans that I'll link to in the description that goes into a lot of depth on how this all works. But in this video, I want to talk to you about why there can still be some issues here. This might seem really straightforward and simple, especially when you've got a controller with a triple pack that you can plug the fans into, and that controller can control up to 16 fans. So you can actually have 4 fans per group with 4 channels on the controller maximum, but you can now also daisy chain 10 fans together. More on that in a second. So in theory, get a triple pack, plug it into a single port, connect the controller up, and you're away. And that's obviously the minimum amount of setting up that you'd need to do. The thing here, though, the problem that most people are going to encounter, I think, is that this controller now has an updated power system. So obviously to power the RGB and lighting, you have multiple different cables, one of which is actually a PCIe cable. So this is a PCIe 6-pin, which is coming from your power supply unit, and that's the same cable that you'd use to power a graphics card. So traditional graphics cards, older NVIDIA cards, AMD, Intel, they would use 8-pin PCIe power connectors. If you split it, you can obviously have 6 pins instead, and then you just plug that into the controller. Now, the reason I say this is a problem is because traditionally Lian Li's control boxes use SATA power, which is the same SSD and hard disk drives. Now they're using a GPU power instead. So this is a 3090, which as standard requires 2 PCIe 8-pin power connectors that you can see here in this Co-Link power supply unit. That's fine, I can plug those in, but then I've got to find a spare cable that will work with the controller. Now, if you're lucky, you might well have that spare cable included with your power supply unit, or if you've built a pre-built system, maybe you've got a cable left over. However, if you're using a graphics card that requires 3 of these 8-pin PCIe cables, then you might not have a spare power cable. And that's going to be a problem if you're trying to then power these Lian Li fans. So obviously I've used 2 here, but if you've got a more powerful graphics card or a newer one which requires an adapter which requires 3 8-pin power connectors, then you're going to run into problems. That's one problem. The other thing to bear in mind is if you are plugging in multiple fans and connecting them up and then connect them to a single port as you can, so you daisy chain these fans together, so you can have up to 10 fans on a single port all connected up like that. You then need to have a SATA power connector on the other end in order to give enough power. So this plugs into the fan that's at the far end of the group of daisy chained fans, and then that cable needs to be plugged into the power supply unit. That ensures that the fans have enough power for the RGB lighting and obviously for spinning up, because otherwise you're sending a lot of power from one end to the other, and that's not quite enough. So you need this extra boost in power, which again requires a spare cable. This one's probably not as much of a problem as the 8-pin or 6-pin PCIe power connector, because you've likely got a spare SATA connector, because you probably haven't got that many SSDs or hard disk drives in your system. So that's not so much of an issue, but it is something to be aware of. I think it's important still to know this. If you are planning on daisy chaining loads of fans, you will need that extra connector there. The other thing that's important to know is that in this system you can't actually mix the fans together. So you can have various groups. You can have 120 and 140 mil fans together. You can even put the LCD fans and the standard fans on the same controller. But what you can't do is mix and match the fans together. So they have to be on separate ports. You can't put a LCD fan, for example, in the middle of a group of standard TL fans. They have different connectors on them, and if you do it, they won't work. The other problem is you may well find that a group of LCD fans, one of the LCD screens isn't working. And Lian Li's solution to this currently is to swap the fans around, reposition them in the group, and then power it back up, and you should find that that then works. This is fine as a problem-solving solution. However, if you've already put the fans in your case, that means you have to unscrew them all and take them apart and then do that. Obviously, other things like firmware updates and software updates might well help with that, but there's still some things to be aware of. Find out more in the wiring guide linked in the description, where I go into a lot more depth on all these things, but hopefully it's given you some interesting insights to be aware of. You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos, you might well find them interesting or useful, and most importantly, have a great life.